lowest interest rates. And there's more. Open a MyGoals Plus or MyGoals Premium account and you could enjoy 200 Rand cash back every month for the duration of your loan term. That's up to 14,400 Rand cash back. Visit netbank.co.za to apply for your tailored personal loan. See money differently. Netbank. We are a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
And we went on a water safari and Mom spotted a hippo and it said grrr.
There is a place where you can see wonder and the wild with breathtaking scenery and endless landscapes. Enjoy good food and embrace great taste.
And the next day we went to the Reed Dance. I saw the maidens handing over reeds to the mighty Zulu king and the Zulu warriors chanting Baye.
Explore all this and more in the magical Zulu Kingdom. This message is brought to you by KZN Tourism and Film Authority.
Real savings, real benefits. Here's what real clients say about Outsurance. Here's Amy.
To anyone who has not reached out to Outsurance, what are you doing? Reach out today.
Yusuf, 45 from Tegadal, pays just 700 Rand a month for his 2021 VW Polo.
It just shows that Outsurance is top of the tops when it comes to insurers.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to the second hour of The Talking Point. Welcome to the show. It is a Tuesday, so what we do every Tuesday this hour, we talk finance with Brian Hurst. Today is the last Tuesday of the month, which means that we'll be unpacking, in particular, your questions of the month. So Brian is standing by with all of that. And can you believe it? He's asking for a new jingle after he cried about the previous jingle because, what did you say? You didn't.
My jingle said that if you smoke marijuana, you probably wouldn't get insurance. I've subsequently found out that you will get insurance. As a matter of fact, I think if you don't smoke marijuana, you won't get insurance. But that's why I said the jingle was wrong. But Cathy, please, come on, guys in the studio. You have to find the new jingle for me.
We liked our old jingle, and we were going to stick with our jingle. You said you didn't want it, so now it's gone. There's no chance for another jingle.
Oh, you're hard, eh? What? You must be a hard mother. Gee, those poor twins.
All right, we'll get into conversation with Brian shortly. Hear your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Cathy, Dumela. Cathy, I respect your views, my sister. Can you please tell me, which public hospital works right in South Africa after ANC took over? Look, Pelenomi Hospital in Bloemfontein. I don't know how can I describe that hospital. It's worse. Orange Hospital in Bloemfontein. When your patient or somebody you love goes there, you in Orange Hospital, you know that he might not come back. The hospital which was working all right, it is Universitas. I don't know if it is still under the government. Skosana, Northern Ireland.
Hi Cathy, it's Judy here from KZN. The tragedy of the food contamination killing children and affecting their health is that the root cause hasn't been established. This is not so much about food as it's about waste, that we're not dealing with waste correctly. So the proliferation of pests, the rats, the mice, the cockroaches, whatever, all the insects that go after waste, that's improperly managed. That's the issue. Thank you.
Morning, Cathy. This is Sam from the Free State. You know, I'm concerned with the amount of sugar that is found in food that is intended for infants or toddlers. I'm a parent now of a 1-year-old, and I've come to notice that a lot of the items that I buy for my son to eat are very high in sugar. So I don't understand why they are doing this to babies, feeding them so much sugar. I really don't understand that. So this is really concerning from a parent's point of view.
Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
All right, so you know that he is already in studio. Brian, any things that you want to touch on before we get into our questions of the month? I know you've been talking about the rand and how it's gotten better, generally more positive sentiment.
Well, Cathy, I think there's a lot of green shoots appearing in South Africa. The one outstanding item that we need to do is to get off the grey list. And I believe there are only 6 items, very difficult ones, issues that need to be dealt with. 18 have been dealt with. And that means if we can get off that grey list by next June, that's when we'll know more. That could be very well good for foreigners investing in our country. And then hopefully the rating agencies start to look better at South Africa and what's happened with the Government of National Unity. Very, 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 very happy. I think what does concern me is what's going to happen tomorrow in the medium-term budget. Our Minister of Finance has got an enormous job to do. But we want to hear more about Ramaphosa's reform program with allowing the private sector to generate electricity. Further information on what's happening on the ground regarding freight, rail, or the ports. We want to understand fiscal stimulus packages to ignite job creation, because the two things South Africa needs to improve: creating of jobs and improving our growth, our GDP. Very, very important. And we need to have foreigners investing in our country, not in our bonds, not in our equities, because as quickly as the money comes in, it goes out, but actually in infrastructure where you create jobs. We also need to understand comment on how he's going to control our national debt needs to come under control, and I think there's some good signs in terms of government spending to try and do that. He'll also maybe be forced to create a debt ceiling where we're not allowed to borrow above that figures, but we do need to understand that we're not alone. Countries like France and the UK, Italy, some of the South American countries, Brazil, Argentina, all have these debt ceilings. We actually get spooked when America reaches their debt level, so we need to understand it. And you'll have to discuss mainly how South African growth prospects will improve. In other words, to create more jobs. You'll comment on our growth forecast. But statistics reflected in the first 5 months of this year, we did not meet our targets in terms of collections, tax collections, imports versus exports. But the estimate is that we will catch up before next February. And the two-pot system is brought in. They estimate anything around about 5 billion rand, which I must tell you does concern me, because that means people who've been taking money out of the two-pot system have actually paid a lot away in tax. The last figures I saw was about 21 billion collected and 5 billion paid in tax. That's 25%. So if you're taking 30,000 out of your fund and you're paying 7.5 to 10,000 rand tax, what are you doing with that money? And then we need to have comments on the social grants. And they will need to tomorrow convincingly demonstrate that South Africa is still on track to achieve a primary surplus in our budget. So, and also with the rand now hovering around the 1770 mark to the dollar, oil price coming down to $70 again, it augurs well for maybe a petrol cut in December, which is a good time for so many people going away and using their cars. But certainly the Government of National Unity have given a better feel. I'm not saying anything's happened there in terms of the people on the ground, although we have seen the rand recover, and I've said that has had an impact on currencies. But that seems to be working, and let's hope that it keeps working, because if that does break, it will certainly create lack of confidence in South Africa.
Some of the issues, Brian, just on the medium-term budget policy statement, have come out of concerns of this budget also described as an austerity budget. If you look at the Department of Education, they've been on this bid to ask for more funds from National Treasury as things stand. They're having to cut back on essentials.
Yes, and essentials being many teachers have lost their jobs.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. I mean, we've got to educate the people in our country. They need, today the way the world's moving, today a matric which everyone's writing at the moment, is purely a stepping stone to the next part of your education. If you think you can have them, in my day, you could get away with a matric, but today, matric just leads you to university or other areas where you need to be educated. Your education doesn't stop and end at matric. It ends when you've finished whatever else you plan to do leading up to your future career. And so education starts right in the early days, grade N, grade R, all these ones.
Absolutely. So those are just some of the other issues that the Minister then is going to have to deal with in the medium-term budget policy. Okay.
Cathy's not alone, you know. This week in the UK, there's a budget announcement. People are waiting for that. What's going to happen? They believe taxes are going to go up. And then next week we've got the American election. There's a lot happening. We've got problems in Ukraine. We've got the war in the Middle East. A lot is happening at the world. And let's not forget about Africa, Sudan. I mean, so many people have been displaced. And, I mean, we talk about millions. I think the number I saw, 10 million people are struggling. It's frightening.
Brian, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get into some of those questions.
Whew, what a day. Time for that face mask. Leave the face mask on for 2 minutes. 2 minutes? That's not even enough time for it to work. I can't even send an email in 2 minutes or make a cup of coffee.
With Santam, 2 minutes is enough to insure your car online. When you're fully protected with the expert insurer, you're free to live in the moment, not in the worry. Santam. This is freedom. Santam is an authorized FSP, a licensed non-life insurer and controlling company for its group companies.
Hey yo, this is DJ Zero. We're out here at Back to the City. If you're not here, you're missing out. But since you missed out, make sure you check it out on SABC 1 Mzansi for sure.
For all the hip-hop heads, check out the Back to the City special, Saturday 9 November at 8 p.m. only on SABC 1.
SAFM will be hosting its annual Breast Cancer Awareness Roundtable on The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana on Wednesday, the 30th of October 2024 at the Birchwood Hotel and Conference Center in Boksburg. For an opportunity to join the roundtable, email your name and surname to info@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue talking finance with Brian Hirsch. Brian, one of the first questions that we have, I think maybe let's go to the retirement pot system, because you're just touching on it earlier. So I'm switching the questions around then. Under the two-pot retirement system, how do I ensure that the savings pot won't be less than what I have invested if markets fall?
Yeah, look, this is a difficult one because very simply, at the moment, or prior to the 1st of September, people were invested in particular portfolios. And and you could have been a little bit more aggressive in the portfolio, which means more growth assets, property and equities. Now under the two-pot system, the same portfolio that you had as at the 31st of August is where your money will move to in the two-pot system. So let's understand, you've got the retirement portion, and then you've got the savings portion that you're able to draw on. Now, unless you inform the insurance company to change the portfolio under your savings pot, they will continue with the underlying portfolio you had previously. So if you're in a growth portfolio and you're putting, say, 3,000 into your retirement fund, 2,000 going to the retirement pot, 1,000 to the saving, that means at the end of 12 months you'll have 12,000. If markets like in 2022 came off 20%, you wouldn't have 12,000 Rand available at the end of the year to borrow, to take out of the savings pot. You'd only have 9,600. So if you're an individual who intends using that savings pot, that means future contributions at the end of 12 months, you need to speak to the company and make sure that your savings pot is moved into a different portfolio without the risks that you may have in your retirement pot. Remember, you need to take risk. You need to be growth orientated when you're saving for retirement. But if your savings pot is only a 12-month savings account, you don't want to find that markets have dropped. Alternatively, that 12,000, if markets are up, like in the last 24 months, markets have gone up 20%, you'd have more. But you want some certainty. Certainty is and security. But the fact that you have to contact the insurers and the pension funds to say, this is the pot. I mean, there are millions of people in funds. How are they going to actually understand that this can happen? So just be aware that if you're one of those who, the person, I've had 3 callers on this, and I've said, you understand what you're into, contact your company and ask them to be more conservative with your savings pot.
It does sound a bit complicated, at least just hearing you explain it, Brian, because if you go to them and you're saying, please move the savings pot, do you have to tell them exactly where to move it to?
Yes, you'll have to say what funds or what conservative funds have you got. I don't want to lose money, and therefore put it into a money market fund earning 8.5% to 9%. But you actually have to go to them.
Okay, so the administrator decides which funds. You just have to tell them whether you want it in high risk, medium, conservative.
By default, your current portfolio in the 2-pot system is the same as the underlying portfolio as if you had in all your previous monies, which we call the vested portfolio. So if your vested portfolio was more aggressive, growth orientated, that's what your retirement and savings pot will be.
I see.
So you would have to go to the companies and say, I don't want to be. You actually have to you have to be proactive. But how many people are going to be proactive? And I've discussed this with a few insurers, and they said, well, there's nothing we can do. Well, I don't know if insurers don't have an obligation to write to members just to explain to them that their savings pot and what can happen, the same way as they do when you've got in your living annuity. Every year you have an option to increase your living annuity from 2.5 to 17.5, no more than 17.5. The insurers write you a letter. I think the insurers have an obligation to write to pension fund holders and say, this is where your savings pot is invested. Are you happy? Rather than expect the individual in the street to write to insurers.
Do you get a sense that they are overwhelmed by this whole process and that people are literally trying to make sense of it while on the go?
Yes, they're definitely overwhelmed. They're getting 10 to 15 times the amount of withdrawal requests as they did in August in previous months. So they are inundated. They have some systems online, but all I'm saying, I think they have an obligation to inform pension fund holders that your savings pot is in the same underlying, are you happy? The same way as they send you a letter every year when it comes to your living annuity, do you want to increase or reduce the amount you draw a year?
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. And it certainly is something to keep in mind if you do have a pension fund. Perhaps look at those statements a little bit more closely and follow up where you are not satisfied. Okay, then let's come to the tax-free savings account, which of course is different to the savings account under the 2-pot system.
No, the 2-pot system only refers to retirement funds. Now, there are 2 ways of saving for retirement. The first is through a retirement annuity, where you have a tax deduction on the contribution and you can't touch the money until you're age 55, subject to a few conditions. The tax-free saving is a voluntary after-tax investment up to 36,000 Rand a year, and people are saying, why is it important? Well, let me make the comments. If you invest money into an investment not through tax-free saving, 36,000 Rand a year, and I go through tax-free savings, you will pay tax on capital gains tax, you'll pay tax on any interest earned by the fund, you'll pay tax on any dividends received from shares, you'll pay tax. Under the tax-free saving, you will not pay that tax. And that means you will get about a 20% better return under tax-free savings of that 36,000 Rand a year than you would if you're doing it just normally without tax-free saving. There's flexibility and accessibility. You know, under tax-free savings, There are no penalties if you withdraw, whereas under any type of endowment policies or anything else, there could be penalties, and it's accessible. And then you hedge against inflation if you be a little bit more growth orientated. So it's a wonderful way of putting money away. At the moment, you can't put more for an individual than 500,000 during the lifetime, but I think that will increase in the years to come. So it's a wonderful way. You've got that accessibility to cash, and you're getting the benefits of not paying tax.
Okay.
And people don't realize year to year, because it compounds. The compounding effect is enormous.
All right. Thanks for that for now, Brian. We'll continue with Brian Hirsch in a moment. Of course, I'll also take your calls. 086 000 2032. What are your questions for Brian? It is your opportunity to ask them today on the WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104 107. It's 10:30.
A very good morning. With the news headlines this hour, ke Modupi Mohlahlana. 5 more suspects have been arrested in connection with the murders of 5 people at the Nyezane area in Escott in KZN at the weekend. The Judicial Conduct Committee has recommended a further probe into impeached Judge President John Hlophe's complaint against the now retired Chief Justice Mogoeng. And peak hour traffic into the Durban CBD has been affected this morning as taxi drivers blocked 3 of the major access roads in the city. Those are your headlines. A full news update at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand currently trading at 17 rand 70 to the dollar, 22 rand 98 to the pound, and 19 rand 15 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mainly weaker at the closing bell. The JSE is mainly lower in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are trading higher this hour. Gold is trading at $2,751, platinum $1,043 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $71.74 a barrel.
If you think you cannot afford a lawyer, think again. Clientele Legal has made professional legal services affordable for you. Whether it's a civil, criminal, or labor-related matter, we have a nationwide panel of attorneys standing by to assist you. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195 and we'll call you back. Clientele General is a licensed non-life insurer and an authorized FSP. Standard rates and terms and conditions apply.
Get ready for the biggest night in South African music. Tune in to SABC 1 on the 2nd of November at 8 p.m. for the 30th South African Music Awards, celebrating our finest local talent. Catch the yellow carpet action from 6 p.m. and join us as we honor the legends and voices that shape our sound. For more info, visit samusicawards.co.za. Hashtag Less Noise, More Music. Hashtag Summer 30 in partnership with the SABC. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
It is the last Tuesday of the month, so Brian is dealing with your FAQs, frequently asked questions of the month. He'll, of course, take more as we continue with the show. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. On the WhatsApp voice note line, send your voice notes and text messages on 0614 104 107. Okay, well, Brian, here's one that I think so many people can relate with, and it asks for advice. And this listener says, what advice do you have that by the end of the month, the salary I've earned after all deductions leaves me with very little for the rest of the month? And I want to add to that a recent study that I saw, Brian, which indicated that most people have less than 1,000 rand in their bank accounts the day before payday.
Yeah. Well, Cathy, that was a Standard Bank report you're referring to, and they did a sample of 402,000 individuals, and they said 21% had 1,000 or less in their bank account as at the date of payday. 28% had negative balances, therefore using overdrafts. Only half of people had more than 1,000. They didn't comment more than that, but you're absolutely right. Look, let's understand firstly, a lot of individuals get a salary, and then they have automatically deductions, maybe for rent, for insurance policies, from all the things that are really costly items that get paid every month. So all those fixed expenses. And then you come to the end of the month with very little money. And that means that you've got, and they spoke about people having 1,000 rand to last them till the next payday. Well, if you've got children, you've got school, you've got transport, and you need all the food things, you're not going to make it on 1,000 rand a month. However, let's understand those who get grants, and we're hoping that there will be some comments about the grants in the medium-term budget that will extend it further than next year. Hopefully at some stage down the line, that figure, because, when you think about 11 Rand a day, what can you do with that? So the problem with that, Cathy, comes back to budgeting. Understanding what are your monthly fixed costs, what are the extras you need to spend. If you look at cell phones, if you look at technology, if you look at the cost of transport, and you look at all those things that are needed to be paid for during the month. And it's a difficult question, and that is why so many people, and when you talk about the two-pot system, you've understood. Here we've got people withdrawing money from their retirement funds because they're short of money. And it's a one-off payment. It's not going to help them for very much longer. So I come back to the same principle. You need your budget versus your budgeted expenses versus your income. And if your expenses are higher, you have to cut back. You have to find out, am I overpaying for insurance? What is my cell phone costing me? What is my technology costing me? Where am I wasting money? It's a discipline. You can't just say, it happens every month. You've got to take the problem to heart and become that much more disciplined. Easier said than done, I agree, and I don't want, but so many individuals. And now I can tell you pensioners are going to find, with interest rates dropping over the next 14 months, they're definitely going to be earning less, and they're going to be earning less. And remember, pensioner inflation is anything above 8 to 9%. I did some calculations for pensioners. If you take a pensioner's salary of how much they need in retirement, 35% of that expense goes on medical aid, electricity, transport, and food. And if that inflation is running, the medical aids have announced, I did a program yesterday on TV, the medical aid have announced their increases. Discovery between 9.5% and 10% increases. Fed Health, 12% increases. So if you think about that, your inflation rate is 8%, if you're invested in a bank, and you're earning 8 to 9%, and you're taxed on it, that's one problem. If you're not taxed on it, and in a year's time you're only going to get 7%, and cost of living has gone up, how are you going to make ends meet? Yeah. So everyone, whether you just started work, whether you're a family member, when you're in trial, you have to look at how you can cut back. Don't wait for the problem to arise. Do it now.
All right. Thanks for that, Brian. We're going to go then to the WhatsApp line. We've got a few questions coming through for you already. I think this question is more related to the conversation we had last week with the FSCA. And it says, good morning, Cathy and Brian. My name is Eric. I was employed by Marion Roberts Building Civil Contractor between 1981 to 1985. I never took my pension. I need assistance, please, because I don't know the fund administrator and can't find the Murray and Roberts offices.
Well, I'm surprising because Murray and Roberts is a well-known company, and if you please, just take this caller back to and I will find out where you go to and how you go about it. Your money will be there. There are records. They will have those records, and if you haven't taken your pension money, then the chances are whatever you left behind in that 4 or 5 year period will have grown over the next 40 years. So you must have been a youngster when this happened, because if you were working, and we're talking about 40 years ago, you're probably reaching retirement now or just into retirement. So I'll find out give me your number and I'll get back to you. By the way, there were 2 callers 2 weeks ago. I've got that. They left their numbers with me. I'm just repeating something. I did call you both back, and you both promised to send me information for me to investigate on your behalf. I haven't yet received that information. Just reminder to the two of you.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's take this WhatsApp voice note.
I was saying, can you please ask Brian for me to would he advise someone that maybe have access cash that doesn't know what to do with it? Would he advise that person, him, to invest in housing at this time? Maybe buy blocks of flats and rent people on those flats, or maybe buy a house somewhere and pay and make people rent on that house. Would he advise for someone that have excess cash to be doing that with that money?
Okay, I explained on a program 2 or 3 weeks ago about excess cash. If you're going to pay cash for the property, and it's a commercial venture, in other words, as you say, you're going to buy a block of flats, you're going to rent them out, you're going to collect the rent. Firstly, understand that you need tenants, and your tenants come and go. There are costs, there are rates and taxes, there are all the costs with maintaining the property and those things. So if you're going to pay cash for a property, and remember, everyone has different circumstances. So I'm just saying, as a main, would I pay cash for a property unless I knew something was happening in that area or around that property? No, I would rather go into a property fund. They listed, you can speak to a broker, they listed on the JSC, Redefine, Growth Point, Vakili. There are lots of them, and you can invest in any different type of property. There could be commercial properties, there could be warehouse property, industrial property, retail. If I'm going to gear the property, if I'm going to put something down and then take out a bond, I need to make sure that that bond cost, together with all my other costs, rates and taxes, is covered. Yes, there's a lot of benefit in doing that, but it's not just easy, and you can't just leave it. Position is important. So paying cash, I wouldn't pay property. A lifestyle property, yes, where you live rather than have a bond. But if I'm going to buy a property and the question is gear it, borrow, but cover all my expenses in terms of what I collect, that is certainly part of an investment portfolio. And yes, that could be done.
Anonymous, you're calling us from Gqeberha. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to Brian also. On the retirement annuity, I wanted to ask, what is the right age for withdrawal? Is it 55 or 56? Because I remember when I went to Old Mutual, they said I must start 56. What is the correct age there? And all my plans just collapsed because I thought I was eligible for withdrawal at 55.
You are eligible to draw any time after age 55. But remember one thing: if your contract originally taken out reflected age 60 or 65, there may be penalties imposed on what they call early retirement. But if your contract was taken to age 55, but now anyone can retire once they reach age 55. So if they're saying 55 last birthday or 56 next birthday, then you just need to say to them, I want to withdraw, and you just need to find out, are there any penalties that they're going to impose, and then discuss it with them what those penalties are and why they are. I tell you why, because many of the old type of retirement annuities, costs were paid up front, and commission was paid up front, and there may be in terms of mutuals or any other insurance companies' books, there may be still some unrecouped expenses, because what the insurance companies do when they put all their expenses up front, and then each year they recoup some of those expenses until the maturity of the retirement annuity. There may be something left over, but you can retire any time in terms of the Act. It's got nothing to do with Old Mutual when you reach 55.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for the call, Anonymous. We're going to stay in Gqeberha. Siyabonga, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning to Brian as well.
Morning, Siyabonga.
Yes, mine is to ask about the trust fund. We had a dispute. I was working for a mine. We had a dispute on 2016. So they went to court our union, our representative. There's a lot happened with about us, without us. So when they come back to us, they said the court is handed down the judgment that we're going to be compensated 12 months remuneration. Then they didn't ask us about anything to send them to the mine. Then the mine, and then they came back to us saying we must send them the confirmation letter so that they can send us money. We didn't know how they do calculate our remuneration. That's why now I'm having this question to ask Brian. Yeah, how do the trust funds pay us on the remuneration when we are being compensated?
I'm a little bit lost because when you say are you talking about other monies outside of retirement funds?
No, it is outside our retirement fund.
Okay.
We had a dispute.
Okay,
Then,
so was money set aside in that dispute and it went into a trust?
Yes, they took it into their trust account. Then we don't know how did they calculate our remunerations because we don't have even a slip to show us the facts and figures. We did ask for the facts and figures to count on, but they said as lawyers they're gonna ask the union to give them instructions. So there's a lot we don't understand, and there's a lot to be probed.
And Siyabonga, just remind us, which industry are you in?
It's mining industry. We were working in Northern Platinum Mine on the Rende Division. I've been asking you to help me with investigative journalists because there's a lot happened we don't understand now.
Okay, Siyabonga, there are questions that I need to ask, and because this is very specific, let me rather take this off air. Again, my producer will take back your phone number, and within the next week to 10 days, I'll give you a call.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Siyabonga.
Okay, all right, Siyabonga.
When I get more details, I'll report back on what they're finding.
Fair enough, Brian. I've got a question here. How does two-pot system work for non-South Africans?
Well, if you're non-South African and you work in South Africa, you've got an ID and you're an employee of a company, and therefore you're a member of a retirement fund, whether it be a pension or provident fund. It works exactly the same as for any South African because it's got nothing to do with what your nationality is. If you're employed or you have a retirement fund, you're entitled to make use of the two-pot system. Hope that helps.
I've got a message here, Brian, from one of our listeners. It's not signed. He says, my father got divorced from my mother and married a woman who had a child. My father passed away 2016. Then my stepmother passed away 2022. My stepsister inherited everything from our parents because her mother passed away last year. Is that how it's supposed to be, or do I have a chance in claiming a portion of that inheritance from my father? There was no will, and they were married in a community of property.
Okay, well, very simply, I'm not sure if you're referring, and did he mention a retirement fund, Cathy?
No.
He didn't mention a retirement fund.
He just says they inherited everything.
Because let me explain to you. If you die intestate, then the next of kin, in the first case the wife, then the children of the wife, but you're also a child of the deceased, and if you die intestate, then all the siblings, all the children will be entitled to put a claim in against the estate. If it's a retirement fund, then it's different because irrespective of who the beneficiaries may be, the retirement that's in terms of Section 37C of the Pension Funds Act is the trustees have to assess who are the dependents. And you spoke about getting divorced in 2016 and having and then them having a child, which means the child would have been a minor, and therefore the first person that would have been entitled to under retirement monies to receive some benefit would have been the dependent. And it appears you are no longer a direct dependent, you are a beneficiary of your father's estate. So I think what you need to do is, I'm going to give my number out and you can give me a call. Give it another day or two before you call me on 011-880-4888. I need to understand if it's a retirement or a will, who wound up the estate, what the value of the estate was, and how was it done, who is the executor. So 011-880-4888.
Okay.
Was that
All right.
was that anonymous?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Another message. I'm almost 50 years old. I have a bond that's almost paid off. I have investments with Nedbank. I have a second property of vacant land for about 5 years. My question is, must I hold the land or sell it given the cost of property tax, or should I speculate, i.e. build and sell? I don't think that I can afford to live and build there anymore. Please help.
Yeah, well, look. As you say, it's a property. You've done the feasibility. You said you don't think you can afford it. Whether you'll be able to sell the stand, I don't know what you paid for the stand. Whether you'll be able to sell the stand and make a profit or even come out with any money. I know a few people are trying to sell stands. They're virtually going to have to give them away. One of the properties is in Cleveland. We can't get any buyers for that property. But you need to have a look at it. And if you want to build on the property, then what you could do is take money out of the bond that you said nearly paid up and use that money. But you've got to be very careful when you're trying to develop a property, because, you talk about one price today, and by the time you finish building a year later, property prices and building materials have increased in the cost of them. So you've got to be very careful. I don't know where the stand is. I can't comment. But if you can get a fair return from the stand, as I've said to a previous caller, and you invested in a property fund, I mean, I can tell you, property funds have been in the doldrum for the last 5 years. They're up 29% this year because now things are looking a lot better. Interest rates are coming down. So I think property funds over the next 5 to 10 years will do extremely well. And I think they'll do a lot better without all the hassles you have of having your own property that's fully paid for. And remember, I'm not talking about your lifestyle property where you live. I'm talking about investment property. I think you'll do a lot better other than, and I repeat, certain places in South Africa. And anyone listening in the Sea Point and the Atlantic Seaboard may say, Hirsch, you don't know what you're talking about. I agree, because those properties have held their prices and gone up. I can tell you in Johannesburg, I wasn't on air last week for a reason. I have complained about the rates and taxes I'm paying, the value they attached to my property. In July 2023, I was online from 7 o'clock in the morning till 20 past 12 when they got to hear my problem. They halved my rates and taxes in Johannesburg. I live in Sandton, and they halved the rate. They agreed that the rates were absolutely ridiculous. So I'm saying there are a lot of people who also find that the value, and this has got nothing to do with building costs. This is, what is the market value of your property? And so many people today are paying far more than what they should, and you need to get back, you need to object. But I'm making the comment, I'm not sure that paying cash for a property, I'd rather invest in a property fund.
Somebody else is building on that issue of cash for a property. It's Simpiwe in Cape Town, who says that he just heard you say don't buy a house that will be used for commercial purposes, cash. He's asking you to elaborate a little bit on that. He said only buy cash for the house you will stay in. What's the reason? He's currently planning to buy a 2-bedroom flat to rent it out so that he can have additional cash. But hearing you say that has made him doubt his decision.
Okay, well, remember, if you're going to pay cash for a property, you've got to understand you've got to find a tenant. Tenants come and go. You've got maintenance on the property. You've got rates and taxes. And therefore, if you've paid cash, I'm saying, what sort of return will you get on that property if you've paid cash? So let's say you buy a property for R1 million and you get rental of, let's say, 11,000 Rand a month, and your costs of rates and taxes and maintenance and levies when you spoke, and you come out with 5,500 to 6,000 Rand, which is taxable. So 5 or 6,000 rand gives you around about 72,000 rand a year, which is a 7.2% return. If I go into a property fund which owns all the top properties, whether it be industrial or commercial in South Africa, the dividend I will get will be around about the income I will earn will be the same, 7 to 8%. I've got no hassles, I've got no maintenance. And why would your property where you're buying this 2-bedroom flat appreciate any more than the shopping centres all around South Africa, industrial warehouses? I know properties now with space and everything, but if you read all the reports, I think property is a good long term, particularly with interest rates coming down, because remember, all these companies have bonds. Very few of them have paid fully cash. Their bond costs are going to come down. Their costs now for electricity generators has come down. I mean, companies had to now build with generators and put in generators to keep tenants. All those costs are now coming down. So I think you'll get a far better return.
Tandeka, you're in East London. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy.
Yes.
My question is, I've just recently had a cousin of mine pass away, and she left 2 kids. One of them is a minor. She didn't have a will, but she did have life cover. So now, I was just wondering what can we do to protect the minor's money? Because the insurance said they're going to pay it into the child's account, and it's quite a lot of money.
But you said the child is a minor, hey, Tandeka?
Yes, the child is a minor. So they want to pay it into the child's account. So when I spoke to the advisor there, it's like it didn't seem like there's a way for it to be, because there was no will, for instance, saying there should be a trust or anything of the sort. She said there's basically nothing they can do. They have to pay out to the child.
Okay.
So is there anything that, Brian, like you can advise? What can I do to make sure that the money is safe, even though there's no will or anything?
So this question, was there a beneficiary nomination under the policy?
Yes, it's her and her sister who just turned 19.
Look,
so they are splitting the money in half.
Okay. Well, children over the age of 18 can inherit. Minors can't. Normally, what would happen, it would go into the guardian fund. That's the last place you want it to go, to be managed by the government. You want to. So, look, I don't have a good answer for you, but I will talk to our tax practitioners and our state practitioners to see if there's anything you could do. Producer, please take, what's this lady's name? Tandeka. Please take Tandeka's name, and I'll give you Tandeka. I'll find out if there's anything can be done. I'm a little bit surprised that the insurance companies haven't said we'll pay out to the 19-year-old. Terrible idea. Yes, I would rather pay it into a trust for them so that they do what they've got to do, study, and not, and rather not be taken for a ride. But if that's in terms of the beneficiary, but I'm surprised about the beneficiary, the minor, and I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Tandeka.
Okay, thanks, Tandeka. KG, you're in Bloom. Good morning.
Well, thank you so much for taking my call. After listening to the presentations by people from National Treasury and elsewhere regarding the 2 ports, I made a decision that I was not going to bother myself with that money, because I felt the tax on the 30,000 was just too much. And number 2, I felt that it's a double loss. I felt the government is double dipping. I'll be losing on the tax that they'll take from myself on that 30, and also on the money that is invested eventually one day if I live to get to 60. So I just want to make sure, was that the correct assessment?
Absolutely.
I'll be losing both on this side and on the other side.
You made a very wise decision, because 2 things were going to happen. You were going to pay tax, and that when you invest in any retirement fund, the contribution you make up to 350,000 rand a year. I always use that just to let people know that I haven't forgotten about that. But whatever you paid into any retirement fund would have been tax deduction. Now it's taxable when you take it out. But it will also affect the end result, because you're going to lose out on that money and all the compound interest. So the simple answer is well done, and I hope there are more listeners who are thinking of maybe using the two-pot system who will be discouraged by my answer. If you don't need the money, don't take it. Leave it in. That you do not have to take anything out of the two-pot system.
Okay, Brian, we're completely out of time. Quick, let's give out your number.
011-880-4888. I've got colleagues of mine helping me catch up with all the calls. So all I'm saying to you is, please, your phone number, where you're calling from, and please make a note of the question.
Brian, back with you again next week.
Get ready to make your life easier with TV License's new website features. We upgraded to the secure iVery 3D payment gateway and the ability to manage your account information, view, print, and download a detailed TV license statement. You can make website queries for an account and technical support, which has made things immensely easier. It is now a smooth, effortless process that can respond to all user inquiries quickly and efficiently. It is a great way to quickly get the help you need without worrying about a thing. Get started now and enjoy the convenience of TV License's new website features. Visit www.tvlic.co.za today. TV Licenses, do it for the convenience that matter.
South African Airways is expanding in the DRC. We now offer direct flights from Johannesburg to Lubumbashi, the heart of the DRC's mining hub. Our convenient arrival time allows seamless connections to key regions like Ndola and the Copper Belt, opening up new growth opportunities. Traders can benefit from our generous baggage allowance, while SAA's superior aircraft belly capacity ensures your cargo reaches most parts of Congo on the same day. Book now at flysaa.com or contact your travel agent. South African Airways, connecting Africa to the world, one flight at a time.
SAFM will be hosting its annual Breast Cancer Awareness Roundtable on The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana on Wednesday, the 30th of October 2024 at the Birchwood Hotel and Conference Center in Boksburg. For an opportunity to join the roundtable, email your name and surname to info@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
The top stories this hour: 4 people killed in Mpumalanga hailstorms and more arrests in connection with the Escort murders. A very good morning to you. 4 people have died following a thunderstorm in Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga. The storm, which was coupled by hail and strong winds, damaged over 500 houses and schools in the area. At least 12 villages in Nkomazi are severely affected, and 3 municipalities in the province were also hit hard by the severe storm. Dumelo Machocho reports.
We are actually going into Bushbuck Ridge municipality, to areas where a lot of houses have been damaged, where a lot of people this morning are waking up with houses without roofs, because you remember since Sunday this area has been plummeted by a lot of thunderstorm, where damaging houses and also killing 4 people in this area. Yesterday we were in Nkomazi area. It's also been affected badly there. We understand that 12 villages in Nkomazi are affected by the hailstorm. Also 2 people there have been taken to hospital.
5 more suspects have been arrested in connection with the murders of 5 people at the Nyezane area in Escort in KZN at the weekend. This brings the total number of arrested to 6. One of the recovered firearms belongs to a man who was killed during Sunday's shooting. Police spokesperson Robert Netsiunda says the suspects are believed to have been involved in several stock theft and murder cases in the Amangwe area.
They were found in possession of 2 AK-47 assault rifles with 115 rounds of ammunition, 2 pistols with 12 rounds of ammunition, 1.38 special revolver with 1 round of ammunition, and a vehicle which they used as getaway from the crime scene was also recovered. One of the recovered firearms belonged to a man who was killed during the Sunday mass shooting. Investigations also led the police to a house at Ezakeni, where another firearm was recovered. The recovered firearms will be taken for ballistics testing to ascertain if they are linked to other crime scenes in and around the province.
The Judicial Conduct Committee has recommended a further probe into impeached Judge President John Hlophe's complaint against the now retired Chief Justice Mogoeng. This stems from Hlophe's 2020 complaint against Mogoeng, where the former alleged, amongst other things, that the retired Chief Justice conducted himself improperly and unlawfully in the manner in which he handled the complaint against him by Deputy Judge President Patricia Goliath. Kenny Mapanga has more.
Now impeached Judge President Hlophe alleges, among other things, that the former Chief Justice had a private conversation with DJP Goliath in his absence over the matter and thereafter presided over the same allegations and his subsequent counter-complaint in a manner that was inconsistent with his oath of office. Former Chief Justice Mogoeng, however, denies all the allegations. The JCC in its ruling considered that the complaint will, if established prima facie, indicate gross misconduct on the part of the former Chief Justice that may be seen as bringing the judiciary into disrepute. As a result, the JCC recommended a probe by a tribunal. Kani Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Peak hour traffic into the Durban CBD has been affected this morning as taxi drivers blocked 3 of the major access roads in the city. They also overturned rubbish bins and concrete blocks. Members of the Durban Long Distance Taxi Association yesterday announced that they would be embarking on an indefinite strike. The taxi owners are complaining that their vehicles are impounded while they wait for their route permit applications to be processed. The eThekwini Metro Police say the major blockades were in Alice Street, Matthew Mayua Road and Umgeni Road. The International Relations Department says yesterday's meeting between Minister Ronald Lamola and his Ukrainian counterpart Andriy Sybiha is an indication of South Africa's non-aligned policy. The two countries signed an agreement on a visa waiver for the diplomatic service. There was a public spat earlier between GNU partners, the DA and the ANC, after the DA distanced itself from President Cyril Ramaphosa's remarks at the BRICS summit, referring to Russia as an ally. Department spokesperson Crispin Piri.
This week, and this is what we have seen today, shows South Africa's firm non-alignment policy. We've just come from Russia, Kazan, where we had engagements through the BRICS forum with President Putin, and today we are engaging the Minister of Ukraine. Nothing shows South Africa's non-alignment more strongly than that, and that consistency in us saying we're a non-aligned state. We want to be engaging with both sides of any divide to ensure that we're able to drive the process forward.
And Israel's allies have condemned a vote by the Israeli parliament banning the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, the UNRWA, from working within the country. Washington urged Israel to pause the implementation of the legislation. The UN Secretary General says the UNRWA is indispensable and the ban would have devastating consequences for Palestinians. The top story at 11 o'clock, 4 people have died following a thunderstorm in Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Makhalemeli.
If you think you cannot afford a lawyer, think again. Clientele Legal has made professional legal services affordable for you. Whether it's a civil, criminal, or labor-related matter, we have a nationwide panel of attorneys standing by to assist you. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195 and we'll call you back. Clientele General is a licensed non-life insurer and an authorized FSP. Standard rates and terms and conditions apply.
Svali Weekend on a high note with Final Analysis on Sunday night. Tune in to Final Analysis every Sunday night and stand a chance to win a hamper worth 10,000 Rand, courtesy of Diadora and SABC Sport. Final Analysis, the premium wrap-up show, giving you match highlights, final scores, post-game reactions, expert analysis, and sport news weekend roundup of the local and international arena. Catch Final Analysis every Sunday at 8 p.m. on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and 10 p.m. on SABC 3. Also available everywhere for everyone, always on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We've Got It All. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
morning, Cathy. Just quickly on the issue of Phala Phala. I think it's 3 weeks now since the NPA announced that they won't prosecute anything to do with Phala Phala. So my question is, why is the media not inviting Shamila Batoyi? Why are you not holding her to account the same way you used to question Sean Abraham, who was accused of protecting Zuma? Why is Shamila Batoyi not brought into studio so that we ask her a question? Why is the media not questioning her in the same manner they were questioning Sean Abraham? You guys in the media are just going to brush it off because it involves Ramaphosa. I think the media is very problematic in this country. It's lonely here.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. This is Matebola. Sis Cathy, when I stand with Padayashi. Padayashi is right. You know, the freedom that we have in this country, it is killing even our children. You can say, it's not a freedom, it's a rule of law. The rule of law is not being used, not implemented. You see people kill each other with guns and all that, get arrested, get bails, come out. That is a constitution of freedom. So where are we going? Poisons now, we're talking about banning it. We must ban it. Pit bulls have been biting people, killing people. We talk about banning, they are still there. Good morning, this is Matthew Bola.
Good day, Cathy, and good day, Brian. I'd like to thank you guys for the show. I have become a better investor in life because I got diversity in portfolio. As Brian is saying on the tax-free savings, I'm using Satriax funds as well. As a 32-year-old, people are saying, hey, you look madala, you look old for your age. How do you know these things? I just tell them that I listen to Brian on SFM and Cathy. They are briefing more about the information. There's knowledge around the two of you. Thank you for the great show. I have become a better investor in life. Thank you, guys. Brian Mabai from Protea Glen.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Brian, thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely message. We'll absolutely pass it on to Brian Hirsch as well. You're listening to The Talking Point. If you've just tuned in, welcome to the final hour of the show. The sun's just come up in Johannesburg. I just took a look to my right, which is, I always brag about the view in the city. It was a bit cloudy, overcast this morning, but now the sun's come up and you can see the beautiful jacarandas that are blooming all over the city. So from my view, all you see is sort of green and purple right through across the city. Really, really pretty. Okay, so coming up then in the final hour of the show, we're focusing on the mass killings that have taken place in Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape. It has undoubtedly left the nation very shaken. 18 family members were shot and killed in 2 houses in Ngobozana village. They were there gathered for a traditional ceremony. The motive for that shooting at this point is still unclear, and we have had several people arrested in connection with those killings. This morning we're going to then be speaking to Nomfundo Mohapi, who is a clinical psychologist, also CEO of the Wellness Clinic. She's going to be unpacking what they found in the aftermath of those killings when they went down to Lusikisiki. Nyameka Poswa is the secretary of the Lusikisiki SG. She's the secretary, of the Gender-Based Violence Forum combat team in that particular part of the province. Nomfundo, good morning to you. Thanks for your time.
Hi, Cathy. Good morning, and good morning to our listeners.
Nyameka, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Cathy, and good morning to the viewers.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Let me thank you both for your time this morning. Firstly, Nomfundo, let's just start with really what many South Africans have been trying to do, which is understanding what is behind these killings, the motive behind these killings, because they really are senseless to a very large extent. There's no way that they begin to make sense or can actually be justified, contextualized. What is it that you found when you got to Lusikisiki, and the kind of questions that the community there was asking too?
Yeah, thank you, Cathy. So last week on Thursday we went to the Sikisiki, and it was through Nyameka, who's joining us, the secretary of the combat team there in the Sikisiki, that is doing the work, and she called Watisisi Asiko right. We are not okay. Can you come to respond? And I think for me, Cathy, what we found there, more than, I think we are still to fully understand what was the driver of this violence. But for me, as we are busy talking, I mean, in the news there's been a lot of stuff around mass shooting also. But I just realized that as a country, we haven't been able to fully appreciate the psychological cost of what happens behind all of these headlines. And in my over 20 years of being a psychologist and working with pain and trauma in our country, Casey, the stuff that I've heard, the pain that is there. So we worked with the people that were the frontline workers. There was over 45 people who went there during the scene, from family, the police, the social workers, the combat team members, the pastors. But I think for me, what I realized, Katie, that we may not understand as a country is that when a mass shooting like that happens, it arrests the capacity of the very people that should help to actually respond. It is on the headlines, but we don't have sufficient system to support those people so they can support the families. The fact that the families haven't been able to receive any counseling, not because there's no one, but because the people that are on the front line are so traumatized and overwhelmed themselves. They are not able to do the work, and there hasn't been sufficient support to bring them there. So for me, the crisis now, Katie, is about saying, guys, how do we support these people? How do we support these families as the law does its work, as we understand what the causes are? And that will unfold, right, as we go into the communities. But there is a crisis now that the families have not been able to receive support at all.
Nyameka, what made you pick up the phone and put in the call and say, look, we need help, we need support, we're not okay?
Hey, Cathy, we are wounded. We have the traumas of the past. And then this one, it's just rubbed the salt in the wound. We have the frontline workers that have to face the communities. It was such an unfortunate event where they have to go and see 18 people lying dead on the floor, same day, same time. Social workers have to go counsel, do crisis counseling to those families. Pastors, reverends from churches had to go there. Then we saw that we need to go to the families after all this, because during that time they had to focus on burying their loved ones, making all the necessary arrangements. Then it's only now that it's all coming back. They have to deal with the reality that these people will never come back. So they need a hand. They need someone who will say, we can still continue with this journey. But how would you offer? How would you say those words when you are empty inside? That was my cry, looking at the community, looking at the frontline workers, forensic pathologists, the people, Department of Health, Social Development. We have to go out to the families And I say, no, we can't, as frontline workers, go to the communities whilst we are empty, because we have to give hope. So that's why I pick up the phone and say, we want to work with you in 2022 with the issues of gender-based violence in the city. You did the capacity building, you did the mental resilience program. We need you, but we don't have money at hand. I don't know, but I need your services to do a mental resilience and depression session for these frontline workers so that they go to the communities empowered. They go to these families strong enough to say this journey can still continue.
Nyameka, I'm going to ask that we try and get you back on a different line because that connection is not great. While we do that then, Nomfundo, this support, this capacity that the first responders in Lusukisiki raised with you, is it unusual to see this happening where you have first responders that actually have become almost frozen, paralyzed by what they have seen? And how do we begin to understand that in the context of what is happening? Because Lusukisiki is not the only area that has been hit by these mass killings.
So, Kate, I think there is an increasing crisis that is looming in our country, where we have frontline or public officials or frontline responders. I mean, the forensics, they were there, and they talked about what it means for them to look at this. And slowly, because of the exposure, so behind these stats of violence and mass killings, there are people who need to respond. And there isn't sufficient, as a country, we haven't created sufficient support for them. So I think slowly their brains have been frozen. But this one with the mass killing, it's at another level. You have people who are mobilized. So, for example, they said to us, Mfundo, since we've left the family, we had one pastor who said, I've buried people, I've recognized people. After this burial, I had on my list, I'm going to call the family, I'm going to visit them. And he said, I'm sitting here 26 days later, I couldn't pick up the phone. We had a social worker who said, the family is asking me, I can't even do that. So I think with mass killings, it's just at an added level because of the intensity of the brutality, the extent of what people get exposed to, which then makes this arresting of the psyche of the frontline workers even worse. But it is a common thing. And I think for me is to really call out for us as South Africans to say when we hear this headline news, the question for us should be the people behind these experiences, who is supporting them. And we are now having a pile-up. We have over 2 million cases of violence in our country a year when we listen to the police stats. But most of the time, we just don't have the capacity to follow through. We talk about social work. Our social workers, Casey, are exhausted and burned out. It's worse those that do victim empowerment program. So for me, it's just saying to our society, can we just at least start with the Lusukisiki? Can these families not go to December without help or assistance? One of the members of the family said to us, this is the first time I'm even getting a chance to cry about what has happened to me. We have a mother who could hear her child scream and she couldn't help the child, who has to deal with those, and there's no one who is there to support them. So, I mean, for me, really, it's about mobilizing South Africa and saying, guys, we have the resources, we have the capacity. Can we say every time when there's a headline, how do we support? But currently we have these families who need support, and we can't expect these social workers and pastors to go and support them. Can we get volunteers? Can we get people to please come so that we go and gang and support the city? One of the mothers said, my child doesn't want to go to school. She's too scared. The teachers don't know how to support the children. The neighbors are too scared. So it's not just the frontline workers, Katie. The psyche of Lusukisiki is arrested. The country is the community is paralyzed. And as South African, as neighbors, we must and just hold them.
How can people begin to get involved again, because when there's situations of emergency, the ordinary public takes a step back and allows those that are trained to handle those situations. So when you are saying that the first responders themselves need support, that this is also too much for them, who can step in? How can they step in order to offer that support?
Yeah. So, Cathy, I'm just going to give you this email, which is the admin at cmwl.co.za. Admin at cmwl.co.za. I think there's a number of ways, Cathy. My passion, my desire, and it might be an ambitious desire, is that we can at least have a week of healing in the Sikisiki. And for me to go back to the Sikisiki, I had private people who said, Mfundo, we're going to pay for accommodation, we're going to pay for transport. So if people are willing to help, first of all, if there are trained psychologists and social workers who are prepared to dedicate their time just for a week for us to unload. Unyamega said it nicely, because she's also in health. She said to us, you were like our vitamin B12. You just injected us so we can do the work. If people can be able to provide that. I know that SAFM also has CSI people who might have emergency funds to say, we are here, we are willing to go and support that work so that we can be with those people. If there are physiotherapists, because a lot of the people we work with, and trauma is located in the body, Katie. So a lot of the people were saying, I can't sleep, my neck is tense. There was one guy, a family member, for me, I had a chill when he was speaking to me, Mfundo, and he was talking about the pain of black men who can't cry. So if there are people who do like the physical movements that are prepared, we want to commit ourselves to CMWL to see how we can just bring a few people, at least for a week, Katie, to go into Siki and just provide that healing, that support. We can't do it through SOTA. If they can just do it at admin at cmwl.co.za, please reach out. Friends needs are. All I'm saying is, can these families not go back? And I also want to try and bring in Prof. Malusilanga from that. We work a lot with him as a researcher, so that he can then, as we do this work, come in and do the research of saying, but what drives this and how can we support them, so that we can see how we do it in other places and even call in the people that are doing the work. These are just some of the ideas, Katie. Nani, I'm just thinking as I move along, other people might have ideas, because I'm just like, we can't just sit where we are at. Something needs to be done. My friend is something, and we went. And let me tell you, Katie, like the shift that happened after our session, I was so overwhelmed. People were like, Mfundo, we can now go to the families. We are scared to even talk to them. So I think just a week of healing can really, really make a difference in the Sikisiki. Let this be our Christmas gift to the Sikisiki and the families there.
Oh, okay. Nyameka, I'm going to give you then an opportunity to explain to us, as somebody who's part of the gender, the gender-based violence response team there, what is it that you would say the people of Lusikisiki, the community of Lusikisiki needs right now? And perhaps describe it to us as people who are not there on a day-to-day basis, but who have been moved by the story, watching it unfold on a national scale.
Okay, Kathy, thank you. People of Lusikisiki, the only thing that they need, if I can summarize it and say, is the safe community. It cannot be safe without the intervention, like Sis Nofundo has unpacked. We need support for those families. We need empowerment. Remember, amongst those people, there are breadwinners. There are children who are left alone. There is a 2-month-old baby whose mother died. Who's going to take care of that child until he or she grows up? Need someone who's going to be there and assist. I understand Department of Social Development has got a role, but we need to be sure right at this moment There were promises that were made in 2022 by 6 deputy ministers that visited Lusikisiki. We want to see that support coming down to Lusikisiki because we've got issues of unemployment, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, issues of traditional leadership. We need a safe community. We need an empowered community. We need a society where a woman will walk out free even at 8 p.m. in his or her yard without being scared that there'll be someone who's watching outside there that will shoot at any time.
Who in an ideal world would you want to get involved?
Hi, Kitty. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you so much. If we can get the psychologist like Sisnomvuno has started, the one who will do the debriefing session or mental resilience for the families, for the communities. Because I remember one time there is another family member who said we have to demolish this whole area because this thing started last year. But we can't live in a society where people will take those drastic decisions because of the pain. We need someone who will work with that family so that they reach the stage that they really say, we've made up our minds. We are demolishing this house. We want to go back to our roots. We need people who will offer empowerment because we always say, Osis Nomvundo will not always be there in Lusikisiki. They can be there for a period of a week. They need to capacitate within Sitinga Abakapi, people who will support the work that is being done by Lusikisiki GBV Rapid Response Team so that we continue. Then we shout when there is a need, but we continue with the work. We support the families. Remember, we don't have any source of funding. I just said to Sisnomvuno, we need you in Lusikisiki. I understand you need accommodation, you need transport, but I personally don't have that money. Even Lusikisiki GBV Rapid Response Team doesn't have that money. But can you please come down? Because we are wounded. We need your services. We need the whole lot of team. If all the forces can be been deployed to Lusikisiki, like what Department of like SAPS have done, all the forces have been deployed to Lusikisiki, to Oartamo, to Eastern Cape, so that these cases are investigated.
Okay, all right. Nyameka Poswa, we're going to leave it there. Nomfundo Mohapi, we'll leave it there. The call has been made for support out in Lusikisiki for those that are still dealing with the trauma of those mass killings. Let's take the latest news headlines.
A very good morning to you. With the news headlines, ke Modupi Makhalemele. The two accused in the mass murder of 18 people at Ngobazana village in Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape have abandoned their bail application. A woman has died after she was shot on the R102 near Etete, outside Balito, north of Durban. And 4 people have died following a thunderstorm in Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga. Details of these and other stories at noon.
SAFM will be hosting its annual Breast Cancer Awareness Roundtable on The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana on Wednesday, the 30th of October 2024 at the Birchwood Hotel and Conference Center in Boksburg. For an opportunity to join the roundtable, email your name and surname to info@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
And we went on a water safari, and Mom spotted a hippo, and it said,
There is a place where you can see wonder and the wild, with breathtaking scenery and endless landscapes. Enjoy good food and embrace great taste.
And the next day we went to the Reed Dance. I saw the maidens handing over reeds to the mighty Zulu king, and the Zulu warriors chanting, Baye!
Explore all this and more in the magical Zulu Kingdom.
This message is brought to you by KZN Tourism and Film Authority.
Hi
everyone. My name is Itumele Nkune, SABC Sport football analyst. When I feel down and I listen to gospel, it gives me motivation. I'm a person who loves all genres. If I was a chef, my favorite meal that I would prepare would be pap, cabbage, meaty bones, with a bit of acha on the side. My favorite language is Portuguese. Bom dia, como está? Estou bem. What I like about SABC Sport is they give you the platform and the permission to be yourself and speak any language.
Catch the ever-passionate Itumele Nkune's analysis of Bola Letu on match days, live on Latuma. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Hashtag SFM Talking Point.
You heard that very passionate plea from both Nomfundo and Nyameka for support for the community of Lusikisiki. And I think it is a conversation we'll have to pay closer attention to, because part of what they're saying is the cost of these mass shootings is so much bigger than what we can quantify in monetary terms. There has been a very deep psychological effect and impact of those killings. And, you know, we have to find ways of supporting everybody that has been so deeply affected by it. And by the sounds of it, it's not just the families, but it's the communities, it's the social workers, it's the paramedics, it's the people that have had to respond to it, because these are just scenes that even for them, they have not seen in their lives. Well, our final conversation on this morning will be turning our attention to track the year of elections. Of course, we know that there have been by the time the year ends, over 50% of the global population would have gone to the polls, just because of the number of elections that have been held in different countries this year. Next week, all eyes will be on the United States of America. That election is just days away. And of course, a lot of talk on some of the issues. Some Americans view immigration and the economy as part of their top 5 policy issues. Citizens want to see a decline of immigration coming into the country. There is little consensus, though, on whether that should be articulated as a restrictive policy imperative that includes domestic deportation operations, or if it should reflect infrastructure support to help neighboring countries prevent the mass exodus into the U.S. So we spoke to Mr. Rodney Davis, who's a former member of the U.S. Congress from Illinois. He's a Republican, and a managing director at Cozen O'Connor Public Strategies, Jason Altmaier, who's a former member of the House of Representatives from Pennsylvania, who is a Democrat. He's also the author of the critically acclaimed book, Dead Center: How Political Polarization Divided America and What We Can Do About It. So both of them shared their insights with me about some of the issues that are on the watch list for the American voting population. So I started by asking them the question about immigration, the cost of living crisis, and of course jobs, and why all of these evoke such strong emotions among voters.
I don't necessarily know if I would say you're reading the situation wrong, but you're reading it from a perspective that is not here in the United States of America. As we look around, we've seen the failures of the Biden-Harris administration on immigration when it comes to enforcement. During the Biden-Harris administration, through executive actions coming from the White House, they changed some of the most restrictive immigration policies that the United States had under executive actions from former President Trump that led to historic low border crossings. And many Americans, millions of Americans, have witnessed millions of illegal immigration incursions along our southern border over the last 3.5 years. That has become a flashpoint in many communities, some of the most democratic urban areas, because many of those migrants are sent to those communities to get assistance. They've been put into urban centers, which has caused issues in those urban centers. And I think it's going to be an inflection point for certain voters that would normally go out and vote for Vice President Harris. So the concern in the United States is about a lack of border enforcement. And when you don't have border enforcement, you will not have American support from the voters as a whole and from the citizenry, in my opinion, to deal with existing immigration policy issues that clearly need to be fixed. But I've said this before and I'll say it again. I believe because of what we've seen in this polarized environment in the United States, that immigration is the new third rail of American politics. I truly believe that we will see a consensus from both parties to fix the long-term solvency of Social Security and Medicare before we see a long-term solution to our broken immigration system.
Jason, what does that then mean for these presidential candidates? The views are just so divergent on how the question of immigration should be dealt with. And it seems that each candidate is really relying on what they believe will find resonance with the electorate. But does it do what Americans need it to do, which is really ensure that people that are coming into the country are coming in legally so, and that, you know, there aren't laxes when it comes to border control? At least if I think about it, that's the way I contextualize it, because that's a challenge that we're facing in South Africa too.
Immigration is a very interesting issue in American politics because, as you rightly said, it might be the most important issue, the issue that comes up more often, that is of greater interest to Americans, and that is out of great concern for the inflow of immigrants into this country. I would say certainly illegally, but even in some cases legally. People have a concern about immigrants. And I find that to be very interesting because America, more than any other country, is a nation of immigrants. We were founded on mostly European, Russian, Asian immigrants, more increasingly today. So we're talking, when Americans think about immigration today, they're thinking about immigration across our southern border, which is with Mexico. And Mexico has, of course, Central America and South America south of it. And those immigrants come northward. They come across the border in Mexico, and there is great concern among America, whether it be, you know, hyperbole or an over-exaggeration. I think we could have a discussion about the reality of these issues, but it's believed by most people in America that the inflow of those kind of immigrants leads to greater crime, greater public assistance, a burden to the American taxpayer to care for these people who are coming across the border. And yes, many of them are doing so illegally. They're not going through the right channels. I'll say something that maybe Democrats would not like me to say because it is such an unpopular issue. But what Rodney described is accurate, right? In the numbers, the increasing numbers that have come across the border and the lack of enforcement, I think that's intentional on behalf of the Democrats. I don't think that's an administrative oversight or mismanagement in some way. I think it was intentional that many Democratic leaders and members of the Democratic Party, and I think there are people in America generally who think it's healthy to have a thriving economy and bring in people who are going to work. And if the current immigration system, this is what they would say, if the current immigration system isn't working correctly, if we can allow people who we feel are going to work and add to the fabric of this country and add to the employment base and do jobs that other Americans aren't going to do. And there's a human rights aspect in many of these countries to they're fleeing their own countries and see America as the land of opportunity that we believe it to be and we know it to be, and it has always been since our founding. Then it would be okay, Democrats would argue, to allow more people into the country. So I think there is an element where it's intentional that we have this difference in enforcement and immigration. President Trump, of course, took a very different stand with building the wall and enforcing very harshly immigration into America, illegal immigration. So the political issue is very interesting because it is unpopular. Unquestionably, the issue of immigration enforcement is very important from the standpoint most Americans would view it as an unpopular stand to allow more immigrants into the country. Mm-hmm. But I do think there's a sizable portion of the Democratic leadership that views it as a positive benefit to America to have more immigrants and more diversity in this country. And that's why it's such a difficult issue for Democrats, because what they themselves believe is politically unpopular. And if you want to win elections, taking on stands that are politically unpopular to probably the biggest issue in the minds of most Americans, you're on the other side of it. You have to find a way to disguise that or at least minimize that. And that is the tightrope that Vice President Harris must walk.
Rodney, do you want to respond to that?
I couldn't agree more with my colleague Jason on his assertion that the border surge that we've witnessed over the last 3.5 years could have been purposeful. That's difficult for me as a former lawmaker, as I used to tell my constituents. I can't condone people breaking the law when our job is to create laws that should be enforced. And I don't believe Democrats or Vice President Harris or President Biden, for that matter, have taken seriously enough what the American people, even when they're not in a border state, maybe they're in the Midwest where I come from, or in Pennsylvania where Jason represented, they're looking at what's happening a short flight away from them and realizing maybe we need some different policies here. And it actually plays into President Trump's America First ideology very, very well.
All right, and of course that is part 2 of a 3-part series that I had with both of these individuals reflecting on the upcoming U.S. elections. That's where we'll leave it for today with the Talking Point. Show back with you again tomorrow between 9 and midday. Have yourselves a lovely afternoon and stay tuned to SFM for all your latest news and current affairs. The book reading up next.
SAFM will be hosting its annual Breast Cancer Awareness Roundtable on The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana on Wednesday, the 30th of October 2024 at the Birchwood Hotel and Conference Centre in Boksburg. For an opportunity to join the roundtable, email your name and surname to info@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
It's Volley Weekend on a high note with final analysis on Sunday night. The premium wrap-up show, giving you match highlights, final scores, post-game reactions, expert analysis, and sport news weekend roundup of the local and international arena. Catch final analysis every Sunday at 8 p.m. on SABC Sport on TTT Channel 4 and 10 p.m. on SABC 3. Also available everywhere for everyone, always on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We've Got It All. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the
game. The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of A Life of Purpose, written by Luvuyo Wochela and Lumkile Wiseman Kuhlu. The reader is Lerato Velase.
A noteworthy early engagement with civil society occurred in Ottawa, Canada on 21 and 22 October 2001, within a day of the adoption of NAPAD. The conference debated some of the pressing issues and possible action strategies for the coming months. Representing African civil society for the NAPAD, Jacqueline Koyok of the Confederation of Non-Government Environmental Organizations of Central Africa, CONGAC, CONGAC, emphasized African civil society's aim and affirmed that civil society was cautiously supportive. Our goal is to promote peace, security, and the respect of rights. We must reclaim and establish in the African context good governance, human rights, and democracy. It took time for NAPAD to win the support of civil society, labor movements, and the academic fraternity, and lingering doubts remained beyond 2003. A number of South Africans were also unfamiliar with the new initiative, in spite of the hard work in marketing it. Mbeki had presented the NAPAD vision at a special parliamentary session for public discussion on 31 October 2001, just over a week after its adoption in Abuja. He stressed the culmination of a new partnership with the rest of the world, and on the basis of what we as Africans have determined is the correct route to our own development. Yet he acknowledged the difficulties and noted that some African elites might resist calls for answerability. In a similar vein, Wiseman had stressed the centrality of favorable political conditions to ensure that the African Development Initiative prospered and flourished. Yet critical African scholarship continued to see NAPAD as a strategy of the African ruling elite to jumpstart Africa's development by endorsing the pervasive neoliberal market model. Such a view resonated with that of the displeased Africanists in South Africa. As late as 2004, there was still acute criticism from the African People's Democratic Union of Southern Africa, APDUSA, ABDUSA, that carried some of the views of the unity movement, which had, ironically, shaped Wiseman's early political philosophy. One of the advocates of the unity movement, Livingston Mkotsi, who had been in exile in Africa and the UK for nearly 3 decades, defined NAPAD in 2004 as a blueprint for total surrender to international finance capital. 4 years later, the University of KwaZulu-Natal's Center for Civil Society produced a 250-page report, including chapters critiquing the NAPAD, whilst examining South Africa's foreign policy, civil society, and the globalization of popular solidarity. South Africa's emerging ascendancy in African trade and exports, often confused with its key position in driving the NAPAD, had also earned the reproachful label of a hegemon by the early to mid-2000s. There were critics who doubted that South Africa would reject neoliberalism entirely if it expected the West to back the NAPAD. Although some writers noted the noble intentions and high principles of the NAPAD, they also noted the blurred distinction between that continental project and the emerging dominance of South African business and parastatals in Africa. Similarly, in some other African countries, the NAPAD vision was contested by NGOs, civil society, and the labor movement because they were not part of its creation and believed that it was founded without the participation of civil society. Wiseman vividly remembers Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, a Kenyan political scientist and once an activist, who articulately opposed NAPAD's principles during the course of 2001 to 2002 because he, like other critics, felt that it advanced a neoliberal development model. However, Wiseman and the HSGIC gradually won Anyang' Nyong'o over, and he ultimately joined the Kenyan government to become the Minister for Planning and National Development. Over time, he finally endorsed and promoted the key objectives of the NAPAD. Leaders of the NAPAD realized that civil society, the academic fraternity, and the business sector had to be mobilized to support the program. From the onset, The NAPAD champions had understood that for the program to succeed, ownership had to be extended to all stakeholders. As soon as the initial draft was proposed, the steering committee was directed to engage not only governments, but also non-governmental stakeholders, including NGOs, labor unions, business, universities, and other knowledge institutions. That led to active participation by all stakeholders in the elaboration of NAPAD policies and sectoral programs. Civil society organizations became active, primarily in the development of the African Peer Review Mechanism and social development programs. Participation by business included an examination of investment policy environments in different African countries, as well as the evaluation and marketing of investment opportunities in key projects. The NAPAD became the subject of many high-level business conferences in Africa and internationally, including special sessions of the World Economic Forum. NAPAD business organizations were established in a number of African countries. South African business leaders established the NAPAD Business Foundation, NBF, as early as 2002, and the NBF continues to play a pivotal role in promoting investment in NAPAD projects in the SADC region, SADC region. Universities and independent research institutions became involved in the elaboration of detailed NAPAD sectoral programs and also in critiquing and enriching the NAPAD vision. Yet the vastness of the continent also threw up difficulties. In setting up the Secretariat, Wiseman and his team had to accommodate a steering committee with representatives from 15 countries and to synchronize their plans to cater for the continent's different regional economic community that, despite being largely colonially rooted, were also molded by diverse geopolitical economies and social factors. The OAU had endorsed 8 economic communities from 1975 to 2001. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, founded in 1975. The Southern African Development Community, SADC, founded in 1980. The Economic Community of Central African States, ECCAS, formed in 1985. The Intergovernmental Authority for Development, IGAD, that also ran the Horn of Africa from 1986. The Arab Maghreb Union, UMA, which had been established in 1989. The Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, in 1994. The Community of Sahel-Saharan States, CENSAD, KENSAD, formed in 1998, and the East African Community, EAC, created in 2001, just as the NAPAD was launched. Notwithstanding these archetypical economic diversities and organizations, Wiseman's Secretariat focused on strategic and generic plans that provided broadly for the entire continent. By April 2002, he and his team were ready to present to the HSGIC on 8 priorities. Strengthening the capacity of peace support operations. Building democracy, political, economic, and corporate governance. Augmenting the provision of health services with an emphasis on HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. Enhancing agriculture, focusing on extending the area under sustainable land management and reliable water control systems, improving rural infrastructure and market access, increasing food security, and strengthening research and technology. Widening trade access to the markets of the industrialized countries. Broadening access to education and expanding educational facilities.